Recording in progress.
Hi, Rick. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, Sam.
All right. Are you ready? I'm going to have Donald come up now, and then we go from there, okay?
Sounds good.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Donna Chow, and I'm your host and your moderator for today's eLotus webinar. eLotus is the leading provider of continuing education for acupuncturists. Today's webinar is Palmistry Case Analysis presented by Rick Bernard. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few items to familiarize you with our webinars and how they work. Today's webinar will be from 11 to 12 p.m. Pacific time. And in this webinar, Rick will examine a variety of hands in depth in this webinar, expanding our understanding of palmistry. This class will wrap up everything we learned in Rick's previous palmistry courses. So if you haven't already, you can watch all of them at elotus.org, which are all CEU approved. And even better, I recommend the Gold Pass membership, which gives you free access to all of his past and future webinars, as well as unlimited CEUs and free herbs. For lecture notes, download them directly from the Blue Course Access page in your eLotus account. To use the webinar chat room, set your chat preference to everyone so that everyone can see what you're typing and be part of the conversation. To ask a speaker a question, enter your question into the Q&A box. And finally, the quiz and video replay. You'll be notified by email tomorrow once they are available. Now let's get started with today's webinar and welcome Rick Bernard, who has studied palmistry for over 20 years with his mentor, Richard Unger. And today he will share his interpretation of what he has learned and hopes that it inspires us to study more about this branch of medicine to better support our patients and clients. All right, Rick, are you able to take over now and share your PowerPoint?
Okay. Okay, I think we're set. Thanks for joining me again. I want to take care of a few housekeeping things first. Somebody brought it to my attention that I haven't actually talked about how you actually take a print from somebody if you actually want to do a reading. You don't need a print, but it actually does make it easier. So you're going to need to get some ink first. You can get it from any art store like a Michael's. You can even get it on Amazon. And you want to get, it's called Speedball water-based black ink. Okay, again, it's Speedball water-based black ink. And you also need to buy a little roller. They should sell it at the art store. Just like it looks like a paintbrush, but very, very small. And then you also want like a block that they should sell. And you squeeze the ink onto the block, and then you roll the roller on it so it's thoroughly coated, and then you roll it over the hand. And you totally get the ink all over the hand. Then you just get a piece of paper on a desk, and then have them take a print like so, and have them do both hands. It's fairly easy. Yeah, I'm going to show some slides today that actually aren't prints, so you get used to seeing what a hand looks like and how to read it without actually looking at a print too, because that's important. A lot of times, obviously, when you're in a private practice, and you're maybe taking a pulse, and you want to look at somebody's hand, you're not going to ask them to take a print. So, so you want to be able to actually read the hand itself. So, I also want to give you some information on. I'm not sure if I'm going to be teaching any more classes or not. My new real estate gig has really taken over my life. So at least for the next year, I'm going to be concentrated on the real estate and try and sneak in this stuff when I can. But I found I'm not really great at multi-processing. And I'm really good at focusing on one thing at a time and just putting all my energy into it. But just not very good at this. So, so I'm going to give you some good resources you can use. First of all, my mentor, Richard Unger, just came out with an incredible book. And it's called Hand Analysis 101. It's a 1,500-page book. And you can order, actually, you can order it comes in 3 volumes. They're quite large. And it's not cheap. It's $750, but it's the most amazing book I've ever read. You can also buy the online version, and which is actually what I did, and it's $375. So quite a bit more manageable. It works great, looks great. It's an amazing tool. Actually, this first slide is actually from that book, but you won't actually need me anymore, quite honestly. It's so incredible. And he actually kind of goes into even how to thread. It'll show a hand, and it'll show you how to look at it from different aspects. Ideally, when you look at a hand, you want to look and try and triangulate. You want to try and get at least 3 features, 3 traits in the hand, and then blend those together. And that's the real art of palmistry. It takes a while. I'm not great at it. I'm constantly trying to improve on it. Richard is amazing at that. So anyway, he would be a great resource to get the book. I'm going to give you some information on Richard. He has a site you can go to. It's handanalysis101.net. And the book, it says you can order it now, but it looks like it's not actually orderable yet. But you can read about it, and it shows a little bit about what's involved in what's in the content. So it's good to actually just look at it, and to actually get a hold of Richard, and maybe you can order it now directly from him. He's at area code 415-331-9922. And his email address is richard@lifeprints.com. A couple different ways to get a hold of him. Great guy. He's actually working on another book, a continuation of this 101. I can't imagine there being any more to learn. It's Hand Analysis 102, and it's going to be huge also. There's no book like this. It's an amazing book. You're going to love it. So anyway, it's nice to have good resources. I also want to tell you about another woman that I've studied with, and it's actually a student of Richard's. Her name is Ronelle Coburn. She has a website that you can actually purchase individual modules, and they have different themes, and you can study anything you want. You want to study thumbs, or you want to study fingerprints, or you want to study heart line stuff. It spends an hour really focusing on that. In my class, what we're trying to do is really just kind of throw everything at you. And I know it's kind of been overwhelming, but I just want to try and get as much information as I can to you. And then if you really want to concentrate on an area, you can get one of these books and you can really dial in. So Ronelle has a website, lifepurposenow.com, lifepurposenow.com. And her contact information is 503-928-7798. And if you go to the tab training, there's a tab that says training, and then you go to postgrads online lectures. That'll get you to all the modules that she has for sale. For people that have actually been through the program, what I've taught you so far is enough to start on this and actually use it. So you'll be in good shape. You don't need to do she actually teaches a year-long program also. You won't even need to take it with what you know. So you can just dive right in. I think the modules are like $35 each. They're really pretty reasonable, but they're really fantastic. She's a really great teacher. Okay. So obviously I've been involved in hand reading or body reading systems for a long time. Hand reading is something that really drew me more than probably any other system. I just love the fact that you can, well, it's very much like Chinese diagnostics, right? You're looking at a person's tongue, you're telling them what's going on with their body by looking at their exterior body. Hands are a great way to do it. It gives you more information probably than any other system from a psychological perspective to really get a profile of behavioral traits from a person. There's really no stronger body reading system than this. I'll talk about handwriting analysis because they're very similar in here in just a minute. But this is really just such a great system for learning more about what's going on with a person inside, which can be really helpful. Okay, so there's a couple of holes in what we've gone over so far that I wanted to kind of talk about before we get into a few analysis of some case analysis. So I wanted to talk a little bit about finger tips. And even fingertips give some information about a person and how they think and what they're all about. So let's take a look at the different types. There's 4 basic types of fingertips. And at the top is the pointed type. And pointy types are, they're artistic, poetic, they're dreamers, they're idealists. They want to make a world a better place. So if you see tips like that, that's kind of what a person is about. Okay, and I'm going to show you some prints and show you what they look like. Okay. The second one is the conic print. And you can see it's kind of a rounded print, not as pointy. And we'll show some examples of it. And conic tips are kind of emotional, more people-pleasing type people, kind of easygoing, impulsive. You can say they're, depending on which finger that conic tips show up on, we'll tell a little bit more, and we'll kind of examine that a little bit more detail as we go along. The third one is the square tip, and square tips are led by reason, order, utility, a little more cautious. They're not the type to be impulsive like the more conic tips. The square has a lot to do too with just practicality. They really lead with their head rather than their heart, where the conic tip is more heart oriented. Okay. Then the final tip is called spatulate. And spatulates actually kind of branch out. They kind of explode at the end. And those are action oriented people. They're very individualistic. They're very creative. But action is really a key word for them. A good phrase also is intolerant of restraint. It's almost like they have so much energy, it has to explode through the tips of their fingers. Okay. I saw a print of Janis Joplin the other day, and spatula tips tend to show up most on the Apollo finger. That's the finger of creativity and self-expression. And many artists, you'll see, if you notice their fingerprint on their Apollo finger, you'll see it be very spatulated. Janis Joplin, I'm dating myself here, but she was a singer one time, and she had this incredible splaying of her Apollo fingertip, and actually hers is so much. It's so independent, so creative. We call it the Joplin tip. Okay, you won't see many quite as accentuated as hers, but really interesting stuff. Okay, let's keep going here. So you can kind of take a look and get a feel for what tips these look like. You can tell that they're obviously more pointy. And again, those are going to be people that tend to be more idealistic, spiritual oriented. These are very, very pointy tips. In fact, the thumb is not in a great position. I'm going to just kind of see, when you look at a hand, you kind of want to get just a general feel for what's going on with the hand, what shape it is. Are fingers bent or crooked? Does anything look out of ordinary? Is the thumb in or out? Obviously, that tells about a person's ability to make things happen. Or are they under somebody else's thumb? They're more followers. Okay, obviously, thumb is not in a very good, comfortable position. You want to get the thumb to, again, I always talk about this, get the thumb out, spread out. Okay, you want to manifest, create things in the world. Michael heart line, you can see how long it is, tends to kind of start to curve back. Again, this is the Michael heart line, see how long it is. A hermit line would stop short. Notice how flat it is, basically, and actually starts to curve back, and that's called a D-fork. And we've talked about that before. We'll renew it again here a little bit later. But this is kind of a power giveaway. It's kind of a people pleaser line, basically. Okay, so those are kind of the main features. I mostly want you just to pay attention to the pointy tips. Okay, so these are what conic tips look like. You can see how they're rounded, nice smooth round. They're not quite pointy, but they're a little bit of pointiness to them. And then they're not square either. I'm going to show you a square tip in a second. Okay. Curvy heart line, so more creative type person, thinks more right brain, possibly. You can see the heart line curving up, and it looks like it's curving right up to the Jupiter finger. Again, that's a Donna heart line. It's curvy, heading upwards to, so that's a nurturer, somebody that's interested in somebody else's needs and before their own even. Whenever you see a Donna heart line, you always want to think in terms of, is the person taking care of their own needs as well, or is it giving it away? The further it is into the Donna zone, to the Jupiter finger, the more they're going to be more you-oriented, interested in others, making sure other people's needs are taken care of. Okay. And this is a square fingertip. You can see how square the Saturn. Saturn's the finger that tends to get the most square. Saturn is kind of a square personality anyway. They're very conservative, cautious, serious-minded, detail-oriented, want to get the things done. They're the person that drives the car when everybody else is drunk, more responsible type. The square tip just kind of adds to those characteristics. Okay, very reason-oriented. Notice the separation between the headline and the lifeline. Now that's a person who's, when it's that separated, that's a person who's really stubborn. They can be really headstrong. They're not going to look at other people's opinions, what they think is what must be true. So they can be a little bit challenging to deal with at times because they can be very stubborn, set on their ways. But notice also the way the headline, kind of at the end, it kind of starts to come back up. This is not normal. When it comes back up, that's the Mercury finger bringing that up. And that's the ruthless headline. That's a person who's really interested in bottom lines. They want to get to the fact, just the facts, ma'am. Okay, they don't want to fool around and listen to a long story. They just want to find out, okay, what's the point of your story? Notice also what's interesting is the lifeline. This is actually, usually the lifeline comes down more towards the center of the palm, or even a little bit to the left, to the thumb side. But notice how wide this one goes. In old palmistry, that's a person who's, they say, would die in a foreign land, but it just meant a person that likes to travel, likes adventure, wants to go out and see the world, as opposed to somebody who is more cautious, wants to stay home. Okay, I just wanted to point that out, see how wide it goes. Okay, nicely placed thumb. It's a person who's going to be self-motivated. They're not going to rely, they're really self-reliant. They're not going to rely on somebody else to help them do things. They're going to get them done themselves. Jupiter finger looks good, looks strong. Okay. Usually when you see a strong thumb like that, usually you'll see a Jupiter finger that's very strong too. Very self-confident, ambitious. Okay. And here's an example of square tips. You can see how squared off the scientist fingertips are. So this is what it would look like if you saw it in real life. And this is very square, so this is very easy to see. Okay. It's always good to see what hands actually look like. Let's not look at prints. Okay, and here's a spatulated fingertip, and notice the finger. Like I said, the finger that tends to show spatulation is the creativity finger, the Apollo finger. This is all about self-expression. Very common. You look at performers, and you'll see their Apollo finger that will be very spatulated. Really interesting. The thing that strikes me on this hand too, it's a pretty strong. I actually like the shape of the Mercury finger. It's very straight, and it's got good length. That's quick, sharp, and clever. You figure things out really quickly. And they've got a very big thumb. Look at the width of that thumb. That's a display of will. So a person is very, very strong-willed. It can be difficult because they have such a strong will. It looks like the middle zone is a little bit strong too, the know-it-all type of a person. Okay. Didn't print very well, but you can tell it's a very, very thick, strong thumb. Okay. And here's a Pablo Picasso, and he's actually got his hands against glass, so it's going to probably spatulate his fingers even more so than the normal. But notice how his Apollo finger is the most spatulated. And even his Mercury finger's got a lot of spatulation. Okay. The ultimate artist, creative person, self-expressive. Okay, so I'd like to show this because I studied handwriting analysis, probably one of the first things I studied. I met somebody in a nightclub once, a girl, and she had me write a sentence, "Take time to think today, I'll never forget." And she told me all about myself. It was so accurate, kind of blew me away. So it piqued my curiosity. So I started studying it. I studied it quite a bit, took a whole course in it, in fact. And because the handwriting is not just handwriting, they call it brain writing. It really reflects your brain patterns, what's going on inside your head. And there are different zones when you handwrite. You want to look at all three zones. Now, the upper zone has to do with more thinking, mental stuff, ideas, ideals, fantasy, dreams, concepts. So it's all mental stuff. Okay. The middle zone is more practical stuff, day-to-day stuff, what you have to do to accomplish those dreams that are in the upper zone. So taking care of dotting your I's and crossing your T's, just taking care of all the practical things you have to do. Basically has to do with the now, today, where the top zone is more future oriented. And then the lower zone, you look at the lower zone of writing, you want to look, it's really our instinctual needs, our physical bodies, our stamina. All has to do with how you shape your letters in the lower zone. You look at the Y, for example, the Y, in fact, if you look in the bottom right corner here, you'll see some letters. You'll see this Y. Notice how long the stem is on the Y. That's the stamina stem. That's how much stamina a person has, how much energy a person has. And then the big loop is more imagination. This letter has specifically to do with sexual energy, and a person that's got a long lower stem and a very large Y is very sexually oriented. So if you're on a date and you have somebody write a few letters, particularly the Y, you'll get an idea of where they're at as far as that goes. Really, really interesting. So handwriting can tell you so much about a person's attitudes and strengths and weaknesses and inclination to behave a certain way. And also what really drew me to that is that there's a branch of handwriting analysis that has to do with changing traits or improving traits, changing behavior. It's called graphotherapy. And by changing your handwriting, you change your personality, you change traits. Now, certainly there's limitations on what you can do, but if you get a piece of paper and you just write, say, for example, take a letter T. A T tells probably as much about a person's personality as anything. And you want to cross the T. The higher you cross the T on the stem is the higher goals a person has, higher goals and higher self-esteem. So if you're a person that suffers from that, maybe lowest self-esteem, you want to try and build your self-esteem, you get a piece of paper and you write T's. You make a fairly tall T stem, not too much, but fairly tall T stem, but you cross it on the higher part of the stem. And it's like reprogramming your brain to think a certain way, to think in a more confident, positive way about yourself. And I've experimented with it quite a bit. It actually is, well, let's take another example. If you cross the T very long, that's a person that's got a lot of enthusiasm. So if you want to increase your enthusiasm, you just make your T crosses very strong. If you start the cross and you make it light, that means the person is good at starting, but they kind of fizzle out at the end. So you want to have it all the way straight through, very strong. Very interesting stuff, graphotherapy. I really have kind of developed an interest in actually not only learning these body reading systems, but how we can improve our lives with them. Lately, I've been studying a guy named Andrew Huberman, who's I think he's a neurophysicist, who's actually teaches you how to control the mind and change behaviors, change mood through doing physical movement stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. So that's kind of the direction I'm kind of going with this stuff. I really kind of want to try to find ways that we can change our mind through using our body instead of talk therapy or drugs. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, I'm going to show you how these three zones actually apply to our hands as well. And we have what we call the three worlds, and the three worlds are three zones in the fingers. You can do it, you can use the whole hand for this as well, but it really applies much better to just the fingers. And we have the top upper zone, these zone up here, the tips, this whole zone. And we're looking at how long the zone is or how thick the zone is. And we're comparing it to the other zones. So this would be the middle zone. This is middle Jupiter, middle Saturn, middle Apollo, middle Mercury. We're looking at those and we're kind of comparing the zones to each other. Sometimes they'll be thin, sometimes they'll be thick, sometimes they'll be long, sometimes they'll be short. And so it's the more meat there is there, the more time a person spends there. Okay. And then the lower zone is the more instinctual, physical zone, just very similar to handwriting. Really, really interesting. Okay. Yeah, so let's move forward here. See some. So here's a breakdown of actually what each zone has to do with, what it represents. And I actually have a chart from Richard's book that actually details this much more in detail. But basically, let's just take one finger at a time. The Jupiter tip has to do with high ideals. In general, the whole upper zone has to do with ideas, ideals, dreaming, what you want in the future. It's more future oriented. It's what you wish for. Okay. The middle zone has to do with more, again, practicality, making those wishes come true. What do you have to do? You have to set goals. You have to do all the practical stuff. You have to organize things. So the middle zone, and middle zone also has to do with the world of things. People with middle zones tend to like things. They like to collect stuff. They tend to be more ambitious, particularly if they have a big Jupiter finger. This whole Jupiter middle has to do with setting goals, measuring yourself. You see a hand that doesn't have much meat here, or it's very small, you know, a person doesn't really have any goals. They're just kind of hanging out. Okay. So again, high ideals for the upper Jupiter. Measuring your goals has to do with the middle Jupiter. And the lower zone, called the turf zone, has to do with sticking up for yourself, holding your turf, not avoiding confrontation, being able to confront people if needed. Okay. The Saturn finger, the upper has to do with wisdom studies. That's the researcher, the person that likes to really study things. It's kind of an information addict. Big zone in this area would have to do with that. If they had very little in this area, this would actually be a person that tends to worry about things a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit. Or that sometimes that tip will just kind of bend a little bit. That's a person who's worrying. Usually it's the middle finger. If it's the middle finger, it's going to have to be worrying about money. This is the finger really of financial stuff, making money, which leads into the middle zone, which has to do with money security. You see big zones here. That's the banker. That's somebody who's really, really focused on money, making money, managing money, etc. The lower zone here is a little bit confusing for me. Richard gives a lot more information on it. It has to do with foundation, your ethics. I'm going to leave that alone right now. Upper Apollo has to do with creativity, self-expression, more of a critical eye. They'll go into a room and they'll see a picture that's maybe not straight. They want to move it. Okay, they tend to be a little bit more critical, and it can be critical of themselves too. Sometimes that can be turned inward. And again, I'm going to show you prints of this stuff. Interesting, the middle zone on the Apollo finger all has to do, there's different types of intelligence. This has to do with emotional intelligence or design intelligence, has to do with making a room look great, beautiful, great with architecture. You'll see people that have really long zones here, and actually I have one here. I've always been really interested in shows that actually show the before, and then they show what they did to it to make it look better, and design improvements. I love that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting to have a big lower or middle Apollo finger. And the lower zone in Apollo has to do with personal display. If they didn't have much here, they'd be kind of a wallflower, very shy type. A person with a big puffy or bit long lower Apollo has to do with more kind of the ham, kind of the person at the party that likes to be the center of attention. Maybe they just like to perform. Maybe they just like being on stage. And that doesn't mean they can be shy, but actually some people can kind of change their character. But something about wanting to perform, wanting to be a ham, wanting to be in front of people, getting that applause, appreciation. Okay. And then there's the Mercury finger, small finger. Upper Mercury has to do with ideas, again, channeling ideas. Usually they're good in business if it's a long upper Mercury. Again, the middle Mercury has to do with business also. This has to do particularly with negotiations. It's really good with commerce. And then the lower Mercury zone, again, this is the intimacy finger also. It's communication finger and it's intimacy and intimate communications. You combine those two. It has to do with one's physical drive, their interest in sex, basically, intimacy, just closeness. They have a physical need. They need to touch. They need a feel. So if you see a very, very big lower zone there, you know that the person has real high physical needs. I am going to spend some time for questions a little bit today too, and try to work some more in, make it a little bit more interactive if we can. Just there's so much information I want to get to you guys, so sometimes it's hard. So here's a big upper, particularly upper Apollo. You can see how long and big that is. It's actually starting to kind of splay out a bit too. So a lot of creative energy here. But when it's that long, it's a person that's kind of critical thinking. Okay. But in general, her uppers tend to be the strongest of the three zones. She's got a good middle Jupiter, I would say too. That's actually in pretty good shape. So a person who tends to want to measure themselves, define their goals, be a little bit more ambitious. Nothing special in the hand. There are something called teacher's boxes. I'm going to show you. See these boxes here? There's a few different ones, and those are called teacher boxes, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. Here's a line of ambition. The line of ambition usually comes above the heart line, the lifeline, and it'll just sprout right up towards the Jupiter finger. This is a desire to improve, a desire to do more, somebody with high expectations of themselves. Okay, generally a positive marker. Okay. So take a look at this hand for a second and try to think which, well, actually I have it written, so I'm not going to take too much thinking, but just look what strikes your eye, what zone looks a little bit weak. And obviously it's the middle zone. You can see how small it is, how it looks like somebody almost took a bite out of it. This particularly, look at the Jupiter middle zone. Look how weak that is. Look how short that is. That is a person that has very little ambition, very little desire to measure their success at all. In general, all middle zones are weak here, and that's a person that's just not that interested in things, collecting things, not particularly ambitious. When you see, I'm going to point out some things as I see them, some things we haven't talked about. Whenever you see a concave, you see this, how this comes in the middle Apollo, how it kind of comes in like a waist. Those are people that haven't found their place in life. They're kind of, I don't belong. They haven't found their niche. Whenever you see that, the person's going to probably been struggling with that. Okay. Pretty flat, again, very squared off fingertips, particularly you can see how flat this Mercury finger is. This actually is a person who's really good in kind of brainstorming, creative ideas. They'd be a great person to do marketing stuff for you. They're usually really, really good business advice. But you can see in general, these printed the strongest, they're the widest, they're the biggest of the fingerprints. So this is where they kind of lead with. Looks like a Gina wants to be a Gina, but then it's gone off to Jupiter. Remember, that's the Gina in Donna's clothing. That's a person who's really wired to be a Gina. Ginas are, again, they're me-oriented. They're all about their own needs. They're action-oriented, passionate people. But this is a person that doesn't want to appear that way, so they try to put on their Donna's clothes and act more nurturing. But in their true essence, they actually want to be concentrating a lot more on themselves. Sorry about that. Okay. Pretty long headline, you can see how long the headline is, very straight, fairly straight, left linear, logical, reason, practical type of thinking. Again, that goes with the flat fingertips. That really adds to a person who's led by reason, over heart, head over heart. Okay. The thumb looks in pretty good shape. Now she's going to help them get things done for sure. Okay, let's move onward. Let's look at this hand. This is a hand with a very long, big lowers. Look how bulgy the lowers are in this person with a lot of physical needs. Again, look how big this turf zone is. This is a person that can be very highly confrontational. They're not going to ignore confrontation. They're going to stick up for themselves. Not so much in the Saturn finger. Pretty good bulge on the Apollo finger, and definitely on the Mercury, lower Mercury, a person with a high sex drive probably. Plus, look at the Gina on this. Look at the Gina energy. Gina, very big sex energy, very emotional, expressive, in the now, me first oriented, going to be a little bit demanding in probably intimacy arena. And it's a very busy hand. This is actually looks like a hand that's, and actually look at the bulging middle on the thumb. And when you see a big bulge in middle on the thumb, that's a person who's good logic, good reasoning ability, practical wisdom, I guess is a good way to, they have some knowledge, they have certain knowledge of something, maybe something in particular that they really have a good hold of, and not afraid to share it. Really an acumen for problem solving. Can be a know-it-all type. This is pretty bulgy, I would say. It's got a little bit of know-it-all in it. Yeah, again, and this is an earth hand. And actually the lines are kind of fiery. So this is a combination of earth and fire. And that's the worker bee. That's the person who everything revolves around work. That's their life. If work is good, their life is good. If work is bad, their life is bad. So that's a combination. It's just taking a couple different traits, different hand types, and combining them together. Richard has probably 16 of these, and he'll talk about them in his book. I'm not sure how much he goes into it in the first book, but I think for sure in the second, he has all these archetypes that actually help describe what the person's like. And we're going to talk about one of those archetypes when I actually show a hand in a few minutes here. So let's move onward here. So here's a real breakdown. And this is from Richard's book, and he breaks down every finger into different zones, and whether that zone is strong or weak. If it's enlarged, it's strong, and it will have, person will have these type of traits. So for example, let's take a look at upper Jupiter. In upper Jupiter, if they have a large or strong upper Jupiter, they're going to be a person that's high ideals. They take action to support those ideals. They're a dreamer. They tend to be definitely an idealist. They see things how they want things to be a certain way. They could be cause-oriented. It's interesting. I think in Richard's book, he has a picture of, I think his name is a scientist, Oppenheimer, I think is his last name. He was one of the scientists that helped develop the atom bomb. And Oppenheimer was a pacifist who ended up developing the atom bomb. You can see the dichotomy there, the contrast there. And if you look, I saw a picture of his upper Jupiter, and it almost looks mangled. It's unreal. So he was living against his ethics. Richard has a story about the napalm factory. It's a pacifist who works in a napalm factory. So he's working against his very principles, and it actually can take a big hit on the upper Jupiter finger. Okay. So anyway, you can go down. I'm going to let you guys do this because you can spend a lot of time going finger by finger in each zone. This gives you a lot more information on what each finger zone means. So this is obviously on the Jupiter finger. And then we have stuff for the Saturn finger. I want to think of anything that I want to talk about on this. Yeah, Saturn, again, Saturn, I like to look at middle zones on Saturn, see how much they're interested in money. It's good to look at the line that goes to Saturn, the fate line. Is it a strong line? Is a person that's very responsible? A lot of times they'll have a very tall, long Saturn finger as well. Let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about here. Okay, so let's move forward here. I'll let you spend time on this. Excuse me, Apollo finger. Again, I talked about the middle zone in Apollo. I don't belong, they haven't found their niche in life. I'd like to look at that zone for possible problems. And just look at the fingers in general, the shape of the finger. Is it long? Is it short? Compared to the other fingers, is it bent? Is it twisted? That all shows stress on that finger. And then you can look at the individual zones and get a lot more information. Okay. Then you have Mercury. I'd like to look at Mercury. I'd like to look at middle Mercury. I'd like to see what kind of business skills the person has. Are they business oriented? How good negotiator there are, and on the upper Mercury also, and then for just their conceptual intelligence having to do with business, and then the lower zone has to do with the sex energy. I took a friend of mine to another friend was a hand analyst and had her talk to him about his hands, and God, she spent 20 minutes on his lower Mercury. I was so embarrassed, and I'm sure he was too. He had a huge puffy lower Mercury finger. So, okay, so now let's get into hands here a little bit. I'm going to just kind of take a general look at a hand first. And if you look at this hand, and we'll get some other pictures of the hand also. This is a water-shaped hand. And if you look at the lines are very sharp and very, it's like somebody took a whip and whipped them in. This is a fire lines. So it's a combination hand. This is a water hand with fire lines, okay? So that is, we have a nickname for that line. That's called the soap opera. And so on this type of a hand, you're going to see a person who's everything in their life is accentuated. It's high drama, basically. They bring energy. They're exciting to be with. They're alive. They're emotionally active. It's kind of the actress, you might want to say. There's just a lot of drama. Can be melodrama at times, but it's an exciting person to be with. They don't like boredom. They have to bring excitement into their life somehow, and they'll find ways to do it, even if it has to stir a argument. They'll do it so they can get some type of excitement, even if it's negative excitement in their life. Life needs to be chaotic. Often they're late. Their homework's late. They're late at appointments. They just have a lot going on. But they're great friends. They're just alive people. And so if you what I like to do when I do hands too is sometimes, actually Richard does this a lot, where he'll actually bring a husband and a wife into a reading, and he'll look at both of their hands and he'll see what challenges they might have. And so a person that's, say, mated with a person like this, with a fire water hand, is going to have to be okay with someone who's overly dramatic at times. Now, this can be challenging for like maybe an earth type who likes things very simple. But at the same time, it's kind of good for an earth because it gives them excitement. Earth is like simple, routine, practical. They just want life to be simple, but they need some excitement in life. So sometimes they're drawn to people like this. They have traits that they don't have. So it's very common people with opposite traits to come together. So Richard would look at hands like this and would compare and say, these are the likely issues you may run into. You know, this person has this temperament. You know, it's going to be a challenge for you. Are you okay with that? Can you learn to extend yourself, open yourself up to accept that? And in turn, like again, with this person was mated with an earth type with a hermit heart line, Again, a person who needs their alone time, quiet time, solitude, they need their space. Can this person be okay with that? Because this person wants action. They want. So these are the types of issues that the different types are going to end up to. But interestingly, many times people of opposite traits, they end up coming together because they each have traits that the other person is weak in. Really interesting. So let's look at some individual things on this hand. And there's a lot of gift markers on this hand, actually. One of which is the Star of Apollo. The star is a little bit messy. You can see underneath the Apollo finger, it wants to form this 5-pointed star. So it's a little bit messy. It hasn't totally coagulated yet, but it's a lot of creative energy in this person. Okay. Again, they have a very much Adana line. See how this line just curves nicely up into the Jupiter finger. It's a person who really wants to nurture others, take care of other people, has other people's needs at the top of their mind. And the challenge for this particular person, who I know, is to, she wants to save the world. She wants to save everybody's life. And so she has to kind of back off from that, separate a little bit from that. You can't change everybody's life. You have to make sure you take care of your own needs as well. So that's when you see people that have Donna lines that kind of come pretty far, and sometimes they'll come even further over into the Jupiter finger. They're the humanitarians. They want to help everybody. And most lines in the hand, there's you can see strengths or weaknesses, challenges. So you have to kind of try and look at both sides if you can. I think this line I put, there's a lot of blue, blueness. Can you see the blueness in the Venus area? On some of the other hands, let me just take a peek real quick ahead. You can see the blueness in here. And where blue tends to show up tends to be in this area by the lifeline. And it doesn't show up as well as I was hoping. There, you can see it a little bit better, see the blueness, all the blueness through here. So blue in the hands is the blues. The person who has the blues, possible some depression, some sadness. So it's something you can bring up is, are they dealing with that now? And so it's good to look at other parts in the hand and see if there's anything else that can kind of corroborate that, or if there could be a problem there. And I want you to look at the headline. And the headline is this line, and you can see the direction of it, and it comes way down into this moon area. We've talked about this, the Persephone line. And the Persephone is a line, it's a tendency for possible depression. Doesn't happen to everybody, but it's a tendency to want to go down into this underworld, deep meanings, deep thoughts. And but you don't want to stay there, right? You want to bring up some nice pearls of wisdom. Sometimes the deeper you go, the better pearls you get. So it's bringing the gift in this is actually bringing up those pearls and sharing them with others. This person happens to have something called, I'll talk about that in a second. These lines of genius, you can't see them on this very well, but I think on another print you can. So another couple of interesting markers. So in general, if it's a fire hand, so there's going to be a lot going on, right? Just all sorts of stuff. A lot of activity, a lot of ways to look at things for this person rather than a simple earth hand that has very few lines. It's a lot of stuff going on. This is actually an interesting marker here. You can actually see how this little line kind of starts underneath the Mercury finger and it curves downward. This is actually called a love at first sight marker. It's a person who can fall in love quite easily. It's all heart. They can lead with their heart rather than their head. If the line goes straight across underneath the Mercury finger, it's just the opposite. A person who's guarded in their emotional feelings connection, they're all head and no heart, or very little heart. So this person has to kind of stand back a little bit, use their head a little bit, analyze the situation, get to know the person before they actually fall deep over heels in love with somebody. And where the person that has the straight line here, which is called the Sisyphus line, you'll actually see that in Richard's book. It's a person who needs to learn to connect with people and stay connected. How long can the person experience love? Is a good question to ask. Okay. She's got a gift marker here. This is actually also another star forming, not completely formed totally. It's got 5 stems, and that's a star of Jupiter, which is a leadership, ambition, talent for that. This tends to the person that tends to be a leader. People are drawn to them. they want them to lead, and this person is very much a leader. Okay, let's just move onward a little bit here. Are there any other markers in her hand that are concerning? Again, you can see the blueness here, a little concerning. Inside the lifeline, she's got another line, a bolstering line. This will actually help her. She's got really good stamina overall. This will actually help bolster her stamina, and she'll need that to deal with some of this stuff. She has another line, and actually it's hard to see, but it starts here. Always starts, these are called challenge lines, okay, or opportunity lines is a nice way to put it. But they start in the Mars zone, and they come up to one of these different fingers. Usually it's to the Saturn, Apollo, or Mercury finger. And it's hard to see, but she has a line that goes up to the Saturn finger, and that's called a line of abyss line. And that's more than just a depression marker. That's someone who actually feels like they just have sunk into a deep cave and no way out. So it's someone who's experienced that possibly, or more, in most cases, you can bring that up and they'll say, yeah, I really had a hard time struggling it. That doesn't mean they can't get out of it. It just means they definitely have been with that. So there's a couple of lines, so a couple of markers that show concern for that tendency towards depression. Okay. This person has a pretty good thumb though, which will really help her. Anything else? So she's got some healer lines here. They're kind of hard to see, but you see these, the medical stigmata. Person has good counselorship skills. Okay. And this will help with the other stuff that's going on with her, because she'll have a lot of knowledge of being in deep places, and she can bring that up and she can share it with others and help them navigate life a little bit easier. Okay. Again, the blueness here, so you can see how there's some markers that we're a little concerned with. This is looks like a girdle, and this looks like a hero worship girdle. Usually girdles, they're lines that are above the heart line, and they usually kind of go in this area. When they go over to Jupiter, that's called kind of a hero worship line, and that's kind of seeing the best remarkable traits in somebody else and comparing yourself to it, and kind of feeling wanting, feeling like, gosh, you wish you had them. I have actually some of this energy. I find these mentors that I just think are just amazing. I kind of compare myself to them, and I wish I had that more. But in a way, it can help drive you. It can help make you want to work at something and you can see how much room you have for improvement. And so I tended to try to make it a driving force rather than a negative force, and beat myself up over it. Like, well, I wish I had what they had. Well, we aren't all geniuses like Richard Unger. So we do the best we can. We learn from them and try to do what we can. Okay, let's move forward here. Now we're going to run a little bit over, if you don't mind, because I want to spend a little bit of time on questions. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing another class or not, possibly in 2023. I actually miss Chinese medicine. I actually kind of want to try and get back into it. Real estate's good, money's great, but I miss the creativity of this. And when I have any free time at all, I usually study this kind of stuff. Okay. Oh, here's a good example of the abyss line. It's a little bit hard to see, but it kind of runs up here. This direction doesn't show very well on the hand. On the print, it shows actually quite well. Okay, let's move forward. Another giveaway power is see how these lines cross, and it's formed right on the intercommunication line. This is the line that runs to the Mercury finger, and then you'll see some crosses here. It's a desire pollution marker. And so a person who's not in touch with their desires are actually living someone else's movie. So they need to get in touch with their own desires. Okay. So there are a few challenging markers that this person is dealing with, but overall, she's got so much talent and so much positive and a good strong thumb that she's going to be able to make it fine. This is a hand somebody else I know. It's it's an earth hand. I mean, not an earth hand, it's actually an air hand. Doesn't show very well on here, but it's a very rectangular hand. These fingers look shorter than usually you like on air hands, but they just didn't show well the way it was photographed. But what are air people? They're the mental types, right? They're the people that believe in fairness, justice. They like to analyze. They what else can I say about it? They're the observer. They examine. They can be judgmental. They can appear aloof, particularly if they have flat heart lines, because they're not going to show their expression. Again, this person has a flat heart line. Now, flat heart lines tend to show up on air hands a lot, because again, they're the thinkers. Okay. What are people with long heart lines? That's the Michael. I think we nicknamed that the Michael. And that's the person who spends a lot of time thinking. They think about the way they feel. Okay. So that type of a line tends to show up in these hands very commonly. Some other things. Notice the big bulge here on the lower Apollo. Again, this is personal display. So this person likes to be out front, which seems like a contrast to the shyness of possibly reservedness of the Michael finger. But something this person does has to do with display. They like to be on stage in some capacity. Okay, and I happen to know this person likes to do, was heavily involved in sports and loved to perform. Found it harder to perform in front of people, even in small groups, but doing something physical was a great way to express themselves. They do have some power giveaways in this hand. You can look at, and this is an example of a D fork. You can see how this heart line at the end, it goes down towards the Apollo or the Mars area, and it just curves back to the lifeline. So it's a person that tends to rearrange their own needs to accommodate the needs of others. So it's a people pleaser type of hand. It's a difficulty saying no at times. So sometimes a person will recognize it in themselves at a younger age, and they'll make changes to correct that. They'll see that they say yes all the time, and they're not doing what they really feel that they want to do. So they'll correct it. So this may be sometimes a lingering from a past, what they were in the past. So you can kind of ask them where they're at with that. Do they tend to say yes when they really mean no? It's kind of the sympathy date. Yeah. Anything else in this line? It's a line of gets in the lines of ambition. There's actually a big square here too. This is called a teacher square, and this is a marking of a person that tends to see the positives in other people. Kind of tends to see their positive attributes. Yeah, people leave it at that. Let's move forward here. Here's just another picture of the same hand. And notice the curvy thumb. Curvy thumbs tend to be more emotional based people. They run on, their heart has to be in what they do. Michael Jordan has a very curvy thumb. He has to have his total heart in what he's doing. Where straight thumbs are more planners. They're more, everything has to be on a schedule. Everything has to be measured. Everything has to be practical. Where a curvy thumb person will be more gut level, what feels right. Okay. A little bit of a divorce line here. This is called a divorce line. You see, it's a line that again starts from the Mars area. They're tack lines, and it goes to, this is called intimacy point, kind of in between the Apollo and the Mercury finger. So that's some stress in a relationship with an intimate partner usually. Okay. Let's move forward here. You can see that line a little bit better here. You can see how it starts in Mars and goes to intimacy point. Okay, so there may be some stress going on in that area of their life. Again, a better view of the D fork here. Notice a couple things to point out too is notice how the Jupiter finger is kind of pushed up, and where the set, we talked about set point before. So this person has a need for, you can see the other hand, for respect. Respect is very important in this person. Okay, if it was low set, and I'm going to talk about low set. Remember, if low set, if a finger is low set further than it should be, it's a person who's not getting the level of respect that they want. This is a person who needs the respect. Power is important to them. If it was low set, it's a person who's not getting that respect. I saw a photo of Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens was a great sprinter, one of the great sprinters of all time, who competed in the Olympics when it was held in Germany, when it was Nazi Germany, and he won all the races. And it was, but when he got back to America, he ended up just doing just menial jobs. He ended up with a janitor, just really struggled, and he had a very low set. You would expect just the opposite. He had a very, very low set Jupiter finger. Really, really interesting. Also worth noting here is, well, here's another hero. This is kind of a hero worship line too. This is a girdle. This is the heart line. And in this case, this is a very hermit heart line, right? This is a person, again, hermits need their space. They need their alone time. We also nickname this Clint for Clint Eastwood. It's kind of a strong, silent type. They're not going to be gushy and express their emotions. They tend to will do their love rather than express their love. And this would be, so the right hand, this person has a hermit, and left hand, they has a Michael. So they've got both of those traits in them, okay? Because you can't have both. Okay. Again, notice the big lower puffy Apollo. This person definitely likes to perform in some way. He's got some healer lines here, possibly did some counselorship for others. Maybe he's good at that. Maybe he does it at the water cooler at work. He advises people on things. This would be the fate line, which actually stops and it starts up again. And it goes up to the heart line, and the heart line stops the progress. And when you see that, when you see the heart line stop the fate line, that's when your feelings get in the way of your progress in life, your responsibilities. So imagine you're a person that works at a large company, and you have a worker that's always late, never on time, and it's Christmas time, and you need to get things done, and so just a lot of pressure on. And this worker really needs the money. He's got 4 kids he needs to support, and his boss. He goes in to see his boss, and his boss is like, God, I really should fire this guy. He doesn't show up on time. He's just not responsible. But he's got these 4 kids he supports. If I fire this person, what's he going to do? So that's the energy of this line, is when the fate line is actually stopped by the heart line. Sometimes the fate line actually goes up to the head line and it stops. And that's usually a person that's just really bored. Their work is just no interest at all. So whenever you see the heart line stop by a headline, that's probably what's going on. Let's just move onward a bit here. Again, that's the thumb. Looks pretty good shape. It's a pretty strong thumb. It's pretty thick. It's held fairly well outward rather. This is my hand, by the way. So you got some insight into me, I guess. Some stuff I don't want people to know, but I share it anyway. Nothing too bad. Okay. Now I wanted to show you a couple of hands, just some celebrities. So this is a hand I got. And what's the thing that really sticks out in this hand, would you say? And for me, it was the thumb, like the position of the thumb. And there's 2 things about this thumb. One is that it's very low set. This knuckle, where this knuckle is compared to the wrist, it's how low it is. When a thumb is low set, that's a person where things come to them more easily than others. When their thumb is way up here, the thumb knuckle is up here, it's a person who has to work much harder to get results usually. But it's not only low set, the angle of opposition, remember that's the angle of the thumb to the Jupiter, is very large. And that's a person who's going to be totally self-motivated. Okay, they're going to get things done. When it's this far wide, nothing's going to get in their way. They're going to be very willful. You can't see it as well as you'd like, but look at the separation between the headline and the lifeline, which goes to here. It's a huge separation. So it's a person that can be very headstrong. Their way is the only way. Okay. They actually have a pretty curvy finger. This is a Gina heart line. Gina is very passionate, expressive. Look at the separation between the Jupiter and the Saturn finger. That's a person who's has individuality of action oriented. When there's separation between this is, let's not get involved in that. Let's just leave it at that. So I want to tell you that the hand of this person is Kobe Bryant, who was actually one of my idols as a former jock. And actually going back to my hand, although I show a lot of markers that are a lot of flat lines, non-expressive type people, I used to love to play sports. And I used to love to perform in front of large crowds, which is probably where this came from. Okay. Thought I'd throw that in there. A lot of stuff. I just wanted to show these to you. There's a lot of stuff going on here. The main thing I wanted to show you in this hand was these rings. There's the rings here, and there's multiple rings. A lot of times you'll just see one or two rings. They're called rings of Solomon, and they're the ability to see through people's facade. I call them a bullshit detector. Okay, more you have, the better. The more you have of it. Yeah, so great. Yeah, so maybe a good social worker, good at counseling skills. Very kind of similar to the medical stigmata. Medical stigmata has more towards the counselorship itself. This is more. This is definitely an insightfulness. Okay. This is a very interesting hand. Look, notice how high the Jupiter finger is, and how low set the Mercury finger is. As lonely at the top is a person who wants to be, is very ambitious, yet has no closeness in their life. So it's kind of, again, their life is kind of lonely. They're successful, probably, but there's a lacking of closeness and intimacy in their lives. You can see how the whole hand is kind of shifted to have the Jupiter up very high. And this is just a fire hand. I don't know why I threw it in here, but it's just a very active line, active hand, a lot of stuff going on with this person. You could actually take each line individually and kind of study it. You have some dangling nexus here. When you see dangling nexus here, sometimes it's a person who feels unsupported in their intimate relationships. Something's going on, maybe some anger even. You got a D fork here. You can see it branching off. Sorry about that. And just one other interesting marker, when you see a line come from the lifeline and go up to the Saturn finger, now it's not going to Mars, it's going from the Saturn finger. That's called a perpetual student. They love to study. They love to do research. Whenever you see that line, that's a person that's always got their nose in a book, always trying to learn something else. This person has double fate lines. And what's the problem with double fate lines? Is making a commitment to one. So many people that have these have two jobs going on. They're working in electronics during the daytime, and they're doing massage at night. I had a friend that had that. She had two lines going up her hand. Eventually, you have to make a decision, and she ended up going with the massage business. Very interesting. Okay, so that pretty much ends the presentation, and I want to try to respond to any questions that you may have. Let me see if I can. If you guys are okay, we can just spend a few minutes going through some questions. You're left-hand or right hand? Well, you need to do both hands. So left hand is more a person's personal life, how they are in private, what their house looks like when there's no company. Their right hand is how they present themselves in public. And there's an overlap, obviously. How you are in private can fill up into your public life as well, and vice versa. So, but you want to do both hands. You'll get a little bit different information sometimes from each hand. A big square in the middle. That's a Richard talks about this quite a bit in his book. It's a person that feels boxed in. Something in their life's not working. They feel they can't. Maybe they're stuck in a job they can't get out of. They've got they're doing something they don't like. And they have the skill as a great guitarist, but they can't do it because they have to support their family, but so they feel boxed in. That's usually what any kind of boxes means. A person feels boxed in some aspect of their life. Space between Mercury and Apollo. That's just a individualistic thought. They can think for themselves. They're not tied to how other people think. They just have a separation of how the individualistic thinking, pretty much. And then you also can look at the separation between the Apollo finger and the middle finger. Sometimes will tell you a little bit about the person. Person that has no space between these two fingers, Apollo and Saturn, have a concern for outcome, concern for ramifications. People that have splayed out separation here, they could care less. If you look at Robin Williams' handprint, you'll see his fingers are all spread out. He's almost a bohemian spread. They do whatever they want. They don't worry about consequences. They are who they are. So it's interesting. So you can tell a lot even by how a person spreads their fingers. Mine tend to have a big separation between my little finger and my Apollo finger. If it's overly spread out, super spread out, sometimes that's the person just not communicating. They're just keeping them to themselves. Usually they'll have a problem with intimacy. Okay. You have to ink the hand to read it. You do not have to ink the hand. You can read it just like we went through. You can actually just see their hand. That's why I liked it, because I could look at their hand as I was taking their pulse, and I can get to glean some information in 30 seconds to a minute, just to get some insight onto what's going on with the person. Many of your prints show decrease around joints, especially PM. Totally means. So anyway, whatever joint it is, the length of it tells you how much time what's more important to the person. If a person has very long upper zones, they're in their head a lot, they're thinking a lot, they're dreaming a lot. It's what you wish for, the upper zone and the fingers. The middle zone is how do you make it so? It's the practical part. It's how do you do everything you need to do to make those wishes come true, basically. And then the lower zone is just your unconscious desires, physical needs. Physical health, you can see some things about physical health, but not nearly. It's more geared towards one's emotional health. You can look for the lifeline or the breaks in it. That will tell you a little bit if there's has been any history of that, any problems in their life. A short lifeline does not mean a short life. It just means a person who's on a merry-go-round and trying to find that thing in their life to help them feel like they're catching up, they've caught up. Yeah, but it's really difficult. I had a heart problem, so I got in. Actually, it's the main reason I had to quit my job as an acupuncturist. And I'll tell you something else. Hopefully you have time. I know I'm running over. I'm so into body reading systems. I was in my house 2 or 3 years ago, and I was walking across the kitchen floor, and all of a sudden I felt my foot just blow up, just totally expand. I couldn't believe it. I took my sock off to see what's happening. My toe my bottom of my foot just exploded. I went into emergency. They looked at my x-rays. They couldn't really find anything definitive. Excuse me. Sent me to a specialist, podiatrist, and looked at anything. See, I have sesamoiditis, possible inflammation in my sesamoid bone. Put me in a foot cast for a long time. Well, if you look at the spot, exactly where the sesamoid bone is, it corresponds, and your left foot corresponds to the heart. And in my belief is that was a pronoun. It was a sign of things to come, because 3 months later I ended up in the hospital with atrial fib, and I would have really paid attention to that. And so foot reflexology, I really believe there's a lot to it. So any body reading system has value, and I just liked it. I had never shared that story, but it was really interesting. Doing much better now. I've had a couple of heart ablations, and doing much better, thankfully. But scary time, scary moment. Anything else here? Total truth in hand analysis. There's no doubt in my mind and actually it's actually scientifically proven now. Neurophysicists have done a lot of studies on this and showing how the shapes of hands particularly reveal temperament. So there's definitely a correlation between shapes and lines in our hand and what's going on with our brain. It really is just an EKG printout of what our mind is telling us and how we're inclined to behave. We always have free thought, free will, right? We can always make a choice, but we're wired to behave a certain way. We're inclined to behave a certain way. And that's kind of what hands tell us. Okay. I think that's it. I hope I got everything for you guys. I gave you some really good resources. I hope you can use those. Like I said, Richard's book is phenomenal, and Renell's work is also fantastic. I hope to be back at some point. I've enjoyed it. I really would enjoy being in person. I miss the interaction. I feel like I'm talking to myself here. It's actually it can be kind of hard, but I hope you guys all got something from it, enjoyed it, and it kind of helps you and even your own life. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Rick Bernard. We appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed today's class, we would appreciate it if you guys could share your experience on social media to help promote both our speaker, Rick Bernard, and eLotus. As a reminder, the quiz for CEUs and the video replay will both be available tomorrow, and I will send you guys an email notification when they are ready. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you guys at our next webinar on October 12th, 2022. Understanding Jimmy Chang's Clinical Proven Formulas, Part 5 with Dr. Jimmy Chang, where you will have the opportunity to learn a range of herbs for modern conditions such as anxiety, excess sugar intake, vertigo, and high blood pressure. I'll see you guys then. Bye.
Recording stopped.